let's round out this show with a segment that we do every week, Last Week in Southern Labor.
All right.
This is a segment where we talk about what happened in the last week in the labor movement in the South, courtesy of Jonah Furman, who does a newsletter where he does this for the entire United States every week. He compiles what happens in the labor movement in the U.S. every week. You can get that in your inbox at whogetsthebird.substack.com. Whogetsthebird.substack.com. Let's go right into it. So first off, the board reviewed a decision from this summer barring a smaller unit of skilled trades workers at Nissan's Smyrna, Tennessee plant from organizing their own union, as opposed to a union that includes all 4,000 workers at the plant. And so they had like 87 tool and die workers that wanted to form a union with the machinists, as opposed to doing a wall-to-wall union. They just wanted a union for this one small department. And so this could be the first step to returning to quote-unquote micro units, which is a practice that was overturned by the Trump Labor Board. Micro units is exactly what it sounds like. It's units that are small in size and only cover one department in a workplace, as opposed to being wall-to-wall. Now, of course, a wall-to-wall union is more powerful than a micro unit, but as a way to get in the door of an employer, if there's one department that is maybe more interested in unionizing or more amicable to the idea, you could get in there and maybe make some gains for them. And then, it's a way to get your foot in the door. And then also, you've got these strategic questions about, are micro units good? Are they not good? That's not for the boss to decide. That is the drawing line. That's like the big red line in the sand there, that it doesn't matter what the boss thinks, because as the National Labor Relations Act lays out, unions are independent, self-organized, self-constructed organizations of workers. And it doesn't matter what the boss thinks, because unions are our thing. And if we decide that we want to form a union in one department as opposed to the whole company, then the boss can go pound sand.
Or at least that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah, that's the way that it should be. In some new organizing, 60 Steve doors for Tropical Shipping USA and Riviera Beach, Florida, are organizing with the International Longshoremen Association, ILA Local 1359/1860. 113 nonprofit staffers at Leadership for Educational Equity in D.C. narrowly voted to join the machinists, 51-42. And he mentions here that although he hasn't seen the official NLRB filings, the Starbucks organizing wave has now spread to Knoxville, Tennessee. In strikes and bargaining, the 1,400 strong BCTGM strikers are back to work at Kellogg's in Omaha, Nebraska, Memphis, Tennessee, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Battle Creek, Michigan, having ratified the company's latest offer. And this is why he tries not to make predictions, because in the last week he predicted that it was going to be voted down. Though it does sound like the vote is close. For the American Prospect, Jared Facundo reports that leaders of the Battle Creek local were dismayed by the ratification, and whether you chalk it up to actually sufficient improvements for a majority of the workers, or fear of being replaced, or exhaustion from a 3-month strike, the strike is now over. UMWA miners at Warrior Met in Brookwood, Alabama, spent Christmas on strike. For Labor Notes, Louise Feliz Leon covered how they're keeping up the fight, and Kim Kelly and More Perfect Union headed down to Alabama to talk to the strikers. You can watch that video at More Perfect Union. And the 450 steel workers Local 40 strikers in Huntington, West Virginia, took Christmas off from the picket line, but the strike against special metals continues, and the two sides still sound like they're very far apart. The contract standoff that we've been updating you every week during this segment about the Steelworkers Local 8888's 12,000 or so members at the Huntington Ingalls Shipyard in Newport News, Virginia, is now at the stage where the company and the union are disputing the actual math of the contract in the local press. The union is saying the offer on the table is a less than 12% raise over 5 years, while the company says it's 24. That's a big difference.
Yeah, somebody's got to be right, and somebody's got to be wrong there.
Right. I'm inclined to believe the union, personally.
Yeah, I would.
After some contentious negotiations and informational picketing, Unite Here Local 25 members at Colonial Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia, have ratified a contract which includes, and get this, up to 48% raises.
Wow.
A 48% raise. Yeah. Let's see you get that without a union. That's that's the takeaway there.
Very cool to see that.
Yes.
I remember going to Colonial Williamsburg as like a 5th grader on a school field trip, and so it warms my heart to know that all those folks who put that on and try to welcome families and students from across the country, they now have a union and they're winning a big raise.
Yeah, it is very, very cool. And then finally, in some politics related to labor in the South, in response to Joe Manchin's announcement that he will not be supporting the Build Back Better bill, Joe Biden's signature omnibus legislation, the United Mine Workers of America came out with a statement in strong support of the bill, calling on Manchin to reconsider. That's a big deal because Joe Manchin obviously comes from West Virginia, and the United Mine Workers of America have been a very strong supporter of Joe Manchin. They have a very close relationship, and so for them to come out with a statement really publicly chastising him like that that is a big deal. And I think that's a big deal specifically for Joe Manchin as, somebody who wants to say that he's, an advocate for coal miners and things like this. Specifically, the union highlighted the need for the continued black lung benefits paid by coal companies. And this is crazy because this bill isn't going to be passed. The provisions for coal companies to pay into the Black Lung Benefits Fund is going to now be paid by taxpayers instead of coal companies, which is insane.
And I didn't realize that either. So, obviously this is a huge piece of legislation. Our Congress is so dysfunctional to the point where basically only one thing can pass a year,
right?
Absent a filibuster, and there's hardly anything that can get through the filibuster. So
right.
they're looking at just cramming everything into one piece of legislation, which is now on the ropes. Surprise, surprise! Joe Manchin strung everyone along.
Right.
Who could have possibly predicted that?
Right.
But
just really quick, because I hear some, political media talking about the filibuster. The filibuster is a choice,
right,
that these people are making to not pass legislation. Like, it's not in the Constitution. It's not even a law. It's just rules of the Senate that these people choose, just like the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian is not even, and it's so frustrating, people allowing this mystification of this process. The parliamentarian is not even an advisor. She just, recommends things to the president of the Senate, Kamala Harris, and they choose or not to follow that advice. There's nothing laid out for a parliamentarian. There's no, that they're not elected. There's nothing. This is all made up nonsense, and they don't, and it's a decision is the main thing. It's a decision to not do this. The union also specifically highlighted investment in what sound like green transitional industries for displaced coal miners and PRO Act type language, which is very important because the Build Back Better bill increases penalties for unfair labor practices and actually puts penalties on, allows the NLRB to levy fines for unfair labor practices, which they don't have the ability to do right now. And this is, and I think that I really do think that the people, especially in the labor movement and on the, Democrat side of the aisle they have to have some mud on their face for allowing the infrastructure bill to go through without Build Back Better, because this is what the people were saying. This is what the people who voted against the infrastructure bill were saying was going to happen, was that if you pass the infrastructure bill, if you give up this leverage, if you give them what they want here, we're not going to get what we need with this other stuff. And that's why it was so frustrating to see the National AFL-CIO come out in favor of that strategy, because they were so strong on the PRO Act, getting the PRO Act passed. So strong, in fact, that people from the National Federation came to the Alabama AFL-CIO convention and threatened to unendorse U.S. Senator Doug Jones because he was not a co-sponsor of the PRO Act, even though he was going to lose his election no matter what they did, even though it didn't matter what he did because it was a Republican Senate, so the PRO Act wasn't going to pass whether he was a co-sponsor or not. And, it just doesn't make sense to go that far for a superficial thing, and then you've got to actually within your grasp and then endorse a strategy that's going to allow it to get killed. It was very frustrating to me. President Cecil Roberts also called on Manchin to support voting rights protections. So, very good stuff.
Yeah, I was pleased to see UMWA come out with that statement because, like you said, they're usually pretty tight to Joe Manchin. So I think that's good. And like I said, I was not aware of some of those benefits that were tied up into this legislation. So there's a lot there that could help ordinary working people.
Right.
Work sucks, we know, but you can make it better by organizing with your fellow workers. For more information, call or text the Huntsville Industrial Workers of the World at 256-651-6707.